Oh my god! What is that?
I told you I missed having colored hair. Also, my daughter, the big monstera, ended up having a baby, so say hello to my granddaughter, I guess. Anyway, it's the final week of the month. You know what that means. It's style study time. And you guys, this is a very exciting video because when I first started painting back in 2011, long time ago, this was the kind of style I really wanted to paint in. And obviously that changed over time. But I'm so glad we finally get down into this because my child artist self really enjoys this and is really excited. So today we are looking at the gorgeous, super refined, super expressive style of the incredible artist Yizheng Ke. Today's video was requested by Canvas of Thunder and Darwin Roger 893. So thank you guys so much for your comment. I truly hope you enjoy the video and that it's everything you were hoping for. Now, if this is your very first style study, hi, welcome. My name is Srish and I'm so glad you're here because today we're gonna level up your art by like 1,000,000%. Style Study is a regular series we do here on my channel where we take a look at some of our favorite contemporary artists, analyze their work and see what we can learn from it. Keyword learn. We're not here to plagiarize anyone's work or copy their style. We're simply here to learn some really cool art tips and tricks and see how we can apply them to finding our own unique art style. I usually structure my style studies in 3 parts. In part 1, we'll take a look at Yizheng's work, analyze his style and see what we can learn from it. Part 2 will be a study of one of his original paintings. The incredible reference I've chosen today is this one. And in part 3, we'll apply everything that we learned today to an original painting of our own. Sort of original. You'll see. Also, just as a quick reminder, I am taking requests on a public post on my Patreon about what artists you'd like to see a style study on for the month of December, which is Style Study Month on this channel. So yeah, make sure you go leave me a comment on there after you watch this video. I will leave a link in the description. Completely free, I just want to know whom you guys want to see for December. If you enjoyed this video and learned something today, please do let me know by giving it a big thumbs up and subscribing to my channel. Comment below your biggest takeaway from this study and come say hello on socials. All my links are in the video description. And now, whenever you're ready, grab a snack, sit back, and let's dive into another style study featuring Yizheng Ke. Yizheng Ke is a digital artist based in Shanghai, China, and that's pretty much the extent of info that we have on him. We know from his Facebook that he identifies as male and from his Instagram that he likes guitars and miniature Hummers, but that's literally it. So I guess this intro section is gonna be small. But Yizheng paints these stunning, almost traditional looking portraits that kind of look like a beautiful combination of structured realism and abstract impressionism. Like I said, this was a style I've coveted for a long time, and I'm glad we get to learn it today because boy is there a lot to learn. Yizheng's gorgeous art has garnered him over 54,000 followers on Instagram and over 77.8 thousand followers on ArtStation. I think my favorite part of Yizheng's work is this beautiful, creamy looking skin he paints, and most of his subjects are very soft and feminine, but there's this almost dirty window feel to it. Like when you look at his paintings, doesn't it almost feel like you're seeing the character through a smudged pane of glass? Like the character is in the clear bits, but the surrounding elements are refracting or abstract. It creates this almost dreamy effect. I'm so excited to dive into it today. But most of all, you can tell that Yizheng doesn't use a ton of brush economy in his rendering, at least with the skin and focal point elements. There's a lot of little brush strokes, tiny bits of color and light that build up over time to create very complex, very intricate rendering. His work is very gradualist. Speaking of lists, here are 4 key characteristics to Yizheng Ke's art. So I'm sure the very first thing you notice is how Yizheng paints the face to be really clearly defined, followed by the rest of the character's body, and then everything else around them is painted with very abstract brushwork. Like here, you see a lot of definition in her face, some of it in her fingers and forearm, and then her hair and everything else about the background is really abstract and impressionistic. And it's never just random color splotches, there's actually a lot of very textured, crisp brush marks. I feel like this is what creates a very traditional paint on canvas look, because it really does look like marks made with a sort of not very saturated, dry, thick bristled paintbrush. But the point is, there is a lot of energy in the abstraction. Like, if we look at the brush strokes, they're generally straight and at an angle that isn't vertical, so that kind of creates a lot of movement. Here, for instance, see how all that smudginess in the hair is at an angle? None of those brush marks go straight up and down, which if they did, it'd be like a vertical stop, like a sudden obstruction to the movement. Whereas with horizontal and angular lines, it keeps your eye in motion. Here's an amazing example that shows us that this angularity is a choice. See how although her hair is kind of smoothed down towards the bun, the brushwork is all at an angle. Some of the angles almost approach a vertical line, but they're never at like 90 degrees. It's such a subtle detail that you don't notice unless you look for it, but it has a huge impact on the rhythm of the piece. However, looking at the color and value contrast, those are generally the highest in or directly around the focal point, which is usually the face. So here, for instance, see how not only is there a massive contrast between the super dark hair and the very pale skin, but also that super saturated wine color further exaggerates that area. And that's such a great way to really quickly draw your eye to the face. So yes, while the background abstraction is dynamic and textured and fast-paced, it is also usually low contrast. The character, on the other hand, has more of a contrast between light and dark, saturated and muted, and also soft and sharp. We'll get to that in a sec. But put together, Yizheng makes sure that your eyes are constantly moving around the piece, taking in all these different textures and flavors. I also feel like because the face is well defined and it doesn't have those harsh lines that zip across the canvas at an angle, it kind of acts like a place of quiet against all the chaos that lies around it. Kind of like the character is a moment of peace in a loud, frenzied world. Okay, remember how I said there is a contrast of soft and sharp in the skin? Let's talk about that, because my personal favorite part of this style is just how smooth and rich and creamy all that skin looks. In many ways, this is also reminiscent of traditional oil painting, because I feel like this is similar to portraits that were painted around the Victorian era. In either case, the skin looks very soft and blended. There are rarely any super dark shadows on the face. Any hard-edged shadows just tend to be a warm and maybe a dark mid-tone value. Pretty much none of them are super dark, at least in pieces where the skin looks soft and smooth. With the render, it almost looks like the cut and blend painting technique that I once saw in a tutorial by Cynics, I believe. It's the idea that you paint a hard edge for any shadows caused by a plane shift, so like a change in the surface at the eye socket or the protrusion of the chin. You kind of carve in a sharp edge on the side of the plane shift, but then blend the other side out super smooth. So that way you still have that definition caused by the bone structure, but the blending gives you that rounded, baby soft skin look. However, despite it looking smooth and blended, the depth and richness in the skin actually comes from a mix of a lot of midtones, like a lot of them. Now, If you were here last month, we looked at the art of Gret Lusky, and clearly that is a very different style of art. But see how she paints very smooth skin as well, but it is a very different way of blending. Like, this is a very airbrushed digital look in the skin. But in Yizheng's work, that softness isn't from using an airbrush to sort of mix colors together. It comes from using a lot of intermediate tones and painting them in manually. Like, this is one of my absolute favorite paintings, but in just the temple and forehead area alone, look how many colors I found. Or here in the cheek, it's not just a pink, orange, and pale peach color that get airbrushed together. Look at how many different tones are in there. You can tell that these blends are a result of gradually building up tones layer by layer using a small brush radius and a very gentle hand. Like, it takes a lot of time, and that really shows in the complexity of the skin alone. And the cherry on top is the fact that Yizheng really uses specular highlights very sparingly. Maybe a little speck on the nose and very occasionally a muted textured bit of it on the cheek, but that's it. And I really think this adds a tiny bit of shine, but without introducing much contrast to the render. We really want those midtones to shine through here. That's how you keep that skin looking rich and creamy and so beautiful. Now that we understand the structured aspects of his work, let's look at how Yizheng gives way to chaos in his paintings, because it's not just random noise, there's actually a technique to it. For the most part, you'll see that the abstraction starts at the outer silhouette of the hair and clothes. Like here, see how the skin almost always has clearly defined edges, but things like her hair, dress, even the black gloves, those blend out into the background. Here you see that blending in the clothing, but her hair has relatively less chaos around the silhouette. It's not a super clean edge like you see with her face and hand though, there is still some abstraction there. So in that way, the character's face and body generally stand out very distinctly from the background and even from their own hair and clothes. However, there is also an added layer to the impressionistic areas because a lot of the times they actually allude to background elements. Like here, see how there isn't much rendering at all? The brushwork itself is very abstract, but you can tell that these are flower bushes that she's picking white flowers from. Or here, that this character is surrounded by deep snow, stood against a background of dark trees. This is what Impressionism is all about, is the idea of so vaguely indicating elements that are just recognizable enough to tell a story, but not super rendered and defined. But when you pair that Impressionism with a super detailed rendering on the character, I feel like this is what gives us that smudged window effect that I mentioned earlier in the video. It's like you're looking at these characters through a dirty window where you've like wiped the center of the glass to be able to see the face clearly, but the rest of it is still quite smudged out. It creates a little bit of distance between you and the scene, but it also makes you feel like you want to know more. It's such a great way to mess with the viewer's mind because he really uses that defined versus abstract juxtaposition to get the audience involved in the scene, adding complexity to what would otherwise be a fairly simple narrative. Finally, let's take a look at how Yizheng uses color in his work, because it isn't just there for visual appeal. First off, there is a lot of warmth on the character, especially if the environment is cool-toned. Like here, see how with all those blues in the background, the most significant orange tones are on the character? Same here, with all those cool greens and blues in the leaves, the oranges and reds are on the character. This kind of gives us a feeling of the character being a spot of warmth and life in an otherwise cold, harsh environment. However, if the skin is cooler toned, like it's desaturated and has more pinks than oranges, you'll often see the warmth sort of seep into the skin from other elements like hair, clothing, or environmental details like the flowers here. See how hot that orange is and how it's starting to cast a warm glow around her cheeks, palm, and forearm? Here, the red flowers give us that pop of warmth, but there's also like red eyeshadow under her lower lashes. It's like these characters are trying to absorb life from the environment around them. There's almost this synergy between character and environment, like an exchange of warmth from one to the other. Sometimes though, he literally uses color to tell the story, particularly in the abstract bits. Like with this painting of a horse, the background is very, very nondescript. However, because there are paler blues and greys in the back, you can kind of tell it's a morning sky. And there's bits of smudged out browns and greens under the horse's hooves, which gives us the impression of grass and mud being kicked up. So clearly this horse is outdoors in daytime, galloping really fast, and we can determine all of that simply by looking at the splashes of shapeless colors that Yizheng painted. This is the very core of Impressionism, doing a lot with a little. So to sum up part 1 of this study, here are 4 key characteristics to Yizheng Ke's art. Number 1, he always paints the face to be really clearly rendered, but surrounded by very abstract, impressionistic brushwork. There is a lot of energy and movement in the abstraction, and the face feels like a visually quiet zone. 2, the skin is extremely intricate and looks very smooth and almost sculpted out of clay. There's a creaminess to it, and he uses very few specular highlights, if any. 3, the abstraction around the character isn't random at all. There is a very careful method that not only allows the character to stand apart from the background, but also alludes to certain background elements without actually rendering them realistically. And number 4, Yizheng uses a lot of very careful color placement to create a synergy between the character and the environment, and also to tell very complex stories with very little definition. So for our study today, this is the beautiful reference that I've chosen. I specifically went with a grayscale reference for the first piece because I really wanted to nail that blended skin look and figure out how to paint the abstract bits first without having to worry about the colors quite yet. When we learn something new, we want to do it in incremental steps because that way we don't feel overwhelmed. By the way, if you are enjoying learning with me today and you haven't done it yet, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel because it really does help. Thanks! So anyway, I started with a sketch as always. I noticed that Yizheng doesn't usually paint characters head on in terms of the vertical angle. Like even if the character is looking straight ahead, the head is slightly angled up or down, it's very, very rarely straight on. So not only is this character looking to one side, there is also a tilt to the head that we need to account for. That means the eyes were actually quite high up on the head and the cheek and jaw area were very large. That's perfect for our purposes because it gives us a lot of skin to practice all that rendering on. With the sketch in place, I started by painting the simplest of the shapes, the hat/bonnet thing that she's wearing. It's very simple brushwork, essentially just a broad cylinder. There's very low contrast there, the entire hat is very, very dark. That means the brighter tones in the face really pop loud against it. Now, I know what you're thinking. Srish, didn't you say that you don't want very dark shadows around the face? Actually, we want that massive difference in value at the perimeter of the face, remember? Because that draws our attention right to the focal point. But within the face itself, no, we don't want dark, hard shadows. Around the face, yes. Within the face, no. I also went ahead and quickly scribbled in some of those abstract brush marks at her shoulders. Very nondescript, and surprisingly, he uses a lot of blending there. Once that was in place, I decided to tackle the hardest part of the piece, which is obviously the face. I started by placing all the big features first, so I painted the shadows in her jaw, cheek, eye, and nose, and then painted a flat mid-tone into the rest of her face. This allows us to quickly place features in, so we don't really have to worry about sketch anymore. Now, from this point forward, it really is all about refinement. Like we saw in part 1, there aren't any super hard, super dark shadows in the face, and we really want to be able to create that smooth, creamy skin. So I actually went around with a noisy smudge brush first to blend the edges of all those flat colors into each other, and only then did I start to paint the details in. I usually just start to paint over the flat and blend as I go, but for this style, I really wanted to emphasize the smoothness of it all right from the beginning. At this stage, I could feel myself getting a little frustrated with just how much color picking and painting there was. This often happens with painting studies where I'm trying to match a reference exactly. So I took a break from the face and decided to focus on the background textures for a bit. I feel like the back and forth between very grainy areas and very softly blended parts kind of gives us that charcoal look. You know how when you work with charcoal, because it is so soft and powdery, your hand accidentally smudges some bits? It kind of feels like Yizheng has tried to recreate that happy little accident here, and it really just shows how cleverly planned out these effects are. Like, it's such a subtle detail, but it contributes so much to making this digital painting look traditional. Okay, back to the face. Now we zoom in and look at details. I decided to work from the top down for some reason, so starting with the little abstract bits of the forehead where the silhouette of that hat blends into the skin. I sort of pulled some of that black in and created some texture there. I then cleaned up the silhouette of her far eye before working on her near eye. It's interesting how the skin of the eyelid looks smooth and blended, but there's also some harsh lines in there. Like the dark eyeshadow just above her lash line seems to blend upwards into the upper eyelid, but then you also have the creases of the lid that seem to separate the two values as well. The gloss on the eye is actually like a mid-tone grey, just gently painted onto the lid. Also, for some reason, the face in my study looked really worried, so what's up with that? Anyway, so I actually found the nose very challenging because it's like really smoothly blended, but there's obviously a lot of structure in the cartilage as well. I tried to get it looking somewhat similar to the reference, but again, decided to come back to it later and focus on smoothing out the skin instead. Obviously, we're not quite smooth enough yet, but that's the thing with this style, you guys. It takes a long time for it to build up gradually, with lots and lots and lots of midtones blending into each other, but also staying distinct at the same time. Once I felt ready, I went back and tackled the nose again, and I think because the background textures were smooth now, it was a little easier to get the structure right. And when I put that specularity in, it all started to make way more sense. Again, Yizheng is a pro at doing a lot with very little. Like there's literally like 4 tiny spots of specular highlights in the entire face, but do you see how insanely impactful they are? From this point forward, my focus shifted to refinement and trying to match the reference as best as I could. So now we're doing a lot of liquefied transform. Because this image is quite small, it was actually really quick to push and pull the features around and hopefully make her look less terrified. I spent a lot of time trying to get that mouth right though. I find mouths really hard to do apparently, especially at different angles. I definitely need to dive into a bunch of mouth studies at some point. I was also really surprised at how bright that chin and the center of the lower jaw were. It kind of really leads to the brightness on the sides of the nose bridge and straight into that inner eye highlight. I realized I'd neglected painting the neck, so I got down to that next. That's like the last bit of skin before it goes straight into the plain white of the background, and the rendering sort of gradually becomes lower and lower contrast before getting to a pretty clean bottom edge. And just like with the nose, the neck had noticeable form and shading, but it was also smoothly blended. I brightened up the highlights of the skin some more, smoothed everything out as I went. I feel like that really is the key to that creamy skin. You're not just placing down flat colors and then blending it all together in the end. What you want to do is blend the edges of each color as you go. And that way you get smooth edges, but also the colors don't just get completely lost in each other. Alright, final polish. I started with the smaller details like the hair strands peeking out from under the hat. I saved these for the end because these are sharp and we don't want to accidentally blend them out into the skin. I also flipped the canvas to make sure nothing looked too out of proportion because sometimes our eyes can play tricks on us and make us ignore glaring errors. And then after playing around with the background texture some more, I was finally able to call the study finished. I feel like I really nailed it well this time. What do you guys think? With the original painting, I figured since we're doing realism, I might as well see if I can take an actual photograph and paint that in this style. So I went back to my 100 Heads Pinterest board, which by the way, if you're a Patreon subscriber or even just a follower on the free tier, you probably have access to all my references for the 100 Heads challenge. Anyway, so I've been meaning to paint this particular portrait for ages and figured now's the time. I really love how that light creates so many interesting shapes on her face, but without casting a super dark shadow either. Plus, there's so much color variation in the skin, it felt like the perfect candidate for this style. Sketch down, I started to build a color palette, but again, because we want that skin looking smooth and creamy, we want to prep as many midtones as we possibly can. I realized there were essentially 3 separate color palettes going on, one for the highlights in the face, one for the rest of the face, and a third much warmer color scheme in the neck. So when it came to painting the flats in, I decided to keep the key light area of her face distinct right from the beginning, so we always have a frame of reference for the values. I then went around placing flats of all the color variations in the face and neck so that when we color pick during the rendering, we don't have to go all the way to the palette every single time. There's so much pink in the cheeks, but it is like such a harshly defined area on her face, and the skin around it dramatically shifts to orange, so I really wanted to demarcate that. For the rendering, I actually started by placing in a very vague background. Because that face is so warm and saturated, I decided to keep the background very cool and desaturated and just sort of indicate a vague bunch of shapes to create a bit of interest. Remember, the idea is to do a lot with a little, so we really don't need to be painting anything specific outside of the face. Since the hair was simple, I also painted that in, not being too careful about clean lines or anything. We do just want it to blend into the abstraction eventually. Zooming in, I started by rendering her forehead, again working from the top down for whatever reason. Like, I didn't even do that consciously. I usually start with the eyes and build out from there. This is strange behavior for me. Anyway, I did eventually go on to paint the eye, trying my best to have that smoothness of values, but then also the sharp details like the crease of the eye and some of that texture that was picked up by the key light. I feel like with this reference, it was a lot easier to decide which areas to blend out and which edges to keep sharp, because I was in fact stylizing a photo reference and I had free rein to make those artistic choices myself. And that is a really huge part of learning a style. Like, it's all well and good to do an art study of one of the artist's paintings, but it is so important to be able to apply what you learn and make those artistic choices yourself. Sometimes in the past, I've run out of time for a style study video and ended up not doing an original piece. And let me tell you, those are the styles that I've learned the least from. So yeah, anytime you guys decide to study an art style, make sure you practice using that style on an original painting of your own. Okay, coming back to this piece, I actually found the mouth a lot easier to paint here, so maybe it was just the upward angle of that last one that bamboozled me. But oh, do you see how nice that cheek color turned out on the light side of her face? It looks so three-dimensional and sculpted. I'm so happy. For the final bits, I went in and really pushed the smoothness of her skin, just getting more midtones in and blending them out as best as I could. I also upped the contrast and saturation quite a bit, just because I wanted to push how distinct her face looks from the abstract, grey-looking background. And finally, onto the fun parts. I grabbed a bunch of textured brushes and just went nuts on the background, adding those angular brush marks to push the abstraction. It's not often that I get to use all these textured brushes that I've spent years and years collecting, so this was actually loads of fun. I absolutely love how this piece turned out, you guys. Maybe it's a lot more saturated and high contrast than something Yizheng would have painted, but I really tried to stay true to the composition and technique, and I love how this painting ended up. And there we have it, Yizheng Ke demystified. Oh boy, that creamy skin look, that makes me so happy. I'm definitely going to try it moving forward. But what do you think? What was your favorite part of the study? Which of these tips are you going to take with you moving forward? Let me know in the comments below. I have, of course, left Yizheng's links in the video description. Go check him out and show him some love for me. And thank you so much again to Canvas of Thunder and Darwin Roger 893 for requesting this video. I truly hope you guys enjoyed it and that it was everything you were looking for. And if the rest of you guys have enjoyed this video and learned something today, let me know by giving it a big thumbs up and subscribing to my channel for even more art content. Of course, if you love what I do and would like me to keep doing it, you can always support my work by becoming a Patreon subscriber. I post loads of rewards on there every single week, including all of my art, all the speed paints from start to finish, real-time exclusive tutorials that YouTube does not see. They are completely voiced over. You paint along with me. They're like over an hour long. It's called Art and Chill, where we make some art and we chill together for a bit. It is super fun and super helpful. So that goes out, and also you get things like my brush kit and the step-by-steps for every painting, as well as prints of my work every few months. It is all up here. The tiers start at just $1 a month. I'll leave a link in the cards and in the video description. Go check it out, support your girl, and thank you so much. Finally, are there any other artists you'd like to see a style study on? If you want them to be part of my December lineup, you can always go to my Patreon and comment on this post for free. And I'll make sure we do one of them in back-to-back studies at least. But yeah, let me know. And if that's not a thing you're interested in, you can always just leave me a comment below and come tell me on my socials or on Discord. As always, the links are all in the video description. First though, check out my style study playlist. It'll show up here in the outro. I've done a ton of these, and chances are I've probably covered some of your faves on the series already, so check that out. But that's about everything for today, so thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I truly hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Check out those style studies down here, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye!